Welcome to the MangaLove channel.
Today we would like to introduce to you a story about
a werewolf marked me as his mate.
Now he shows up at my window every full moon.
Before we
like
begin,
it's normal.
don't forget to subscribe to MangaLove so you won't miss any of the newest stories.
so you won't miss any of the newest stories.
Today's story.
Now let's dive
The
right
city
into today's
pulsed
story.
with its usual rhythm.
The Miami
Taxis
skyline
blaring,
glowed like a
strangers
jeweled
rushing
crown,
past each other,
stretching
steam
endlessly
curling up
into
from
the night.
manholes like
But
breath from an
inside the
overworked
42nd floor
New
penthouse
York
of
was
the Wilson
always
Tower,
alive, but for
everything
Monique
looked
Edwards,
dead.
this morning
Lights
felt
were
like
off,
survival,
curtains
not
half
routine.
drawn, papers
Her
scattered.
heels clicked
A
unevenly
broken
against
glass
the wet
glimmered
pavement
in the
as she
corner
guided her
beside a
7-year-old
toppled
daughter
bottle
through
of
the
bourbon.
crowd.
And on the
Kayla's small
cold marble
hand clutched
floor
hers
sat
tightly,
Nicholas
her pink
Wilson,
coat a
once
bright
the
flash
untouchable
against the
king
gray
of
of the
a
city.
billion-dollar tech
Mommy,
empire,
are we late?
now slumped
Kayla
with his
asked,
back
her
against
voice
the
soft
kitchen
but
wall,
worried.
shirt open,
Monique
eyes
exhaled,
bloodshot,
her breath
fingers
visible in the
trembling
November
around
chill.
a knife.
A
His
little,
phone
but
lay
we're going to
shattered
make it.
beside him.
Okay.
Another
The
betrayal,
babysitter had
another
canceled at
call
dawn,
confirming
and with
it,
rent already
another
overdue,
headline dragging
missing
his
this
name
interview
across the
wasn't an
world
option.
like blood in
She'd
water.
spent the bus ride
Minutes
mentally
earlier,
rehearsing her
his
pitch,
board had
her
voted to
education,
suspend
her
him.
ideas,
His
her
investors had
experience,
walked away.
but no amount
His
of
secret
confidence
data
could
breach,
hide the
an
truth.
attack that
She
wiped
was
out
a single
billions in
mother
assets
walking into
and
a corporate
exposed
world that
confidential
rarely
information,
forgave that
was
kind of
plastered
truth.
across
As
every
they
news
crossed
channel.
57th Street,
His entire
a paper bag
empire was
burst open
crumbling,
in front of them,
and for the
apples
first time
rolling
in his
all
adult
directions.
life, he
An
truly
older man
believed he had
stooped and
nothing
startled,
left.
tried to gather
He
them,
raised the
muttering
knife to his
apologies.
wrist, his breath
Without
hitched,
thinking,
his
Monique
eyes
bent
shut.
down, scooping
Silence
up apples
stretched
and
across
handing
the
them back,
penthouse
her
like
neat
a grape.
slacks brushing the wet
Mr.
concrete.
Nicholas,
Here you
a
go,
soft
she
voice
said
echoed
kindly.
faintly from
No
the
harm
living room.
done.
He
The man
froze,
smiled,
confused,
his eyes
because
glistening
Patricia
with gratitude.
never came at night.
Bless you, young lady.
Patricia Mark, the woman
Monique
who had been
returned his
more of a
smile,
mother than
then
his
stood,
own,
brushing
never
her
stepped
hands clean.
inside unless he asked
She
her
didn't
to.
notice the
She
tall
had raised
man
him from the
across the
age of
street
8
watching
when
her,
his real
the
parents
one with
traded
the camel
parenting for
coat and
boardrooms.
the expression
She
of
knew
quiet
when to stay
curiosity.
away. But
Dennis
tonight,
Turner
she must
had
have
seen
sensed
kindness
something.
before.
She always did.
Manufactured,
He heard her
transactional,
shuffle
but
inside,
there was
muttering to
something about
herself
this
as she
moment
picked up
that
his
caught
scattered
him off
laundry.
guard.
Third,
The woman
he
didn't
didn't
look
even switch
around
on
to
a
see if
single
anyone
light.
noticed her
This
good deed.
boy.
She simply
Nicholas
helped,
squeezed his eyes
smiled,
shut.
and moved on.
Of all nights,
He found
didn't
himself
want her
still
here.
watching as she
He
took
didn't
her
want her to
daughter's hand
see him
again,
like this,
and hurried
broken,
toward the same
undone,
building he was
shivering
about
like
to
a
enter.
man begging for mercy.
By the time
But he
Monique
didn't have the
reached
strength to
Turner and
answer,
Reed
didn't have the
headquarters lobby,
courage to
her
speak,
pulse was a
didn't have the
steady
will
drumbeat.
to hide the
The
knife.
marble floors
Footsteps
gleamed under
approached.
bright lights.
But then another
Everything
voice,
about the place,
younger,
the hushed
sharper,
voices,
gently scolding.
the smell of coffee
Mama,
and
I
money
told you to
felt
stop doing this
foreign.
late-night work.
Hi,
this
I'm
isn't
Monique
necessary.
Edwards,
Let's go.
she said to the receptionist.
Nicholas blinked.
Her voice steady,
Sharon,
despite
Patricia's
the weight
daughter.
in her chest.
He had
I
seen
have an
her
interview
only
with
twice,
Mr. Collins
both
at
times
10.
in passing. The
Quiet
woman's
eyes
respectful,
flickered briefly
always
to
in
Kayla.
simple jeans
And
and
this
sneakers,
is my daughter,
with an
Monique,
effortless
she
beauty
said
that didn't
evenly.
need presentation.
I couldn't arrange a
She
sitter
carried
this
her
morning,
intelligence
but
like a
she'll sit
second
quietly
skin.
while I...
Anyone
I'm
could see
sorry.
it in the way her
The
eyes scanned a
receptionist
room.
interrupted
She
with
was
a smile
29
that
or 30.
wasn't really
He wasn't
a smile.
sure. A tech
Children
graduate, he
aren't
thought.
usually
Miami
allowed in the
State,
executive
not Ivy
area.
League, not somewhere high
Monique's stomach
profile,
tightened.
not someone
I
he expected
understand,
to
but
ever see in his
the
penthouse.
elevator dinged open.
Let's finish
a
quickly,
man in a
Patricia
navy
whispered.
suit stepped out.
Nico isn't in a good
Middle-aged,
place tonight.
Crisp. The kind
He
who
lost
looked at
his
people
company,
and
Sharon
calculated
said
their
softly.
worth before
I
speaking.
saw the news alert.
Ms. Edwards,
Patricia
he asked.
sighed,
I'm
motherly
Richard
and
Collins.
worried.
You're
This
here
boy,
for the analyst
raised in
position?
glass towers.
Yes, sir.
He doesn't know how
His
to fall.
eyes flicked to Kayla.
Their
then
voices
back.
retreated
His
toward the
lips
guest
thinned.
hallway.
I
Silence
see,
returned.
he added.
Nicholas
Well,
lifted the
let's
knife
make
again.
this quick.
He was ready.
Inside
He was
the conference room,
so
Monique
tired.
tried to stay
But before the
composed.
blade touched
Kayla
his
sat
wrist,
quietly
the front
in the
door
corner,
clicked shut.
her little notebook
Patricia
open,
had left.
drawing flowers.
Sharon had left with her,
Monique's
and
heart
Nicholas was
swelled
alone
with
again.
pride. Her daughter
He exhaled
so gentle,
shakily,
so
placed the
understanding.
point against
Mr.
his skin,
Collins began
and stopped.
flipping through her resume.
The voice wasn't
You've
imagined.
been out of full-time work
Sharon
for almost
burst
8
through
years.
the kitchen doorway like
Yes,
she had been running.
Monique replied,
she had
meeting
come
his
back.
gaze.
For what
I took
reason,
time
he
off
didn't
after
know.
my daughter
To
was
grab
born.
something?
I've done
to check on
consulting
him?
work since.
Or because
Data
some
analytics,
instinct told her to
strategy
turn
development,
around.
freelance.
She froze at the
I
sight
see.
before her.
His tone
Nicholas
was dry.
collapsed
You
on the
must
floor,
understand,
knife
Miss
against
Edwards.
his wrist,
We're looking
tears
for candidates
streaked
who
down
can
his
dedicate
face,
themselves
a
fully
half-empty
to the
bourbon
company.
bottle beside
Long
him.
hours,
She
business
inhaled
travel,
sharply.
high pressure.
Oh my
this
God.
isn't a 9 to 5.
He looked up,
I
pupils
understand
unfocused.
that, she said calmly.
Give me a second,
And I can
he
handle
slurred.
the pressure.
Just
My
go.
work ethic speaks for
But
itself.
she dropped her bag with
He gave
a thud
polite
and rushed to
chuckle.
him.
I'm sure
No,
it does.
she whispered
but bringing
fiercely.
a child to
I'm
an
not
interview
leaving.
doesn't exactly
He
demonstrate
flinched as she
readiness
knelt in
for
front
a
of him,
professional environment.
gripping his wrist with
The
both
words
hands.
stung, but
her
she
touch
didn't
was
flinch.
warm,
Her
firm,
fingers curled
sure.
against her notebook.
Let me go,
With respect,
he choked.
Mr. Collins,
I don't want.
readiness
Sharon,
isn't about
please.
circumstance. It's
You're
about
not dying
resilience,
tonight,
and
she
I've
said.
built mine
Her
every
voice
single
steadied sighed, despite the tremor in her
air
breath.
went still.
Not like
Even
this.
Kayla
Not
stopped
alone.
drawing.
And
Then
not
the
while
door
I'm
opened.
here.
A man stepped
He
in.
struggled weakly,
the same man
but she
from the
held on.
crosswalk.
Nicholas,
Tall,
she
calm,
said,
eyes
softening
like
her
quiet
tone.
sunlight through
Look
glass.
at me.
Dennis
He didn't
Turner,
want to.
CEO.
He didn't want her to see
Everything
the
all right
humiliation
here?
in his
He
eyes.
asked,
But
his
she
voice
touched his
smooth,
cheek
even
gently,
warm.
guiding his gaze
Mr.
upward.
Turner,
And
Colin
when he
straightened.
looked into her
We're just
warm
wrapping
brown
up an
eyes,
interview.
something
Miss
in him
Edwards here.
cracked. He
Dennis's
sobbed,
gaze
harsh,
shifted from Collins
broken,
to
guttural.
Monique, then
I
to the
lost
little girl
everything,
sitting quietly
he whispered.
in the corner.
Everything
Something
I
in his
built,
chest
everyone
tightened.
I trusted.
I believe
they
I saw you
destroyed me.
this morning.
I'm
Dennis
nothing,
said
Sharon.
softly to Monique.
Nothing.
You helped an older
You're
man with his
alive,
groceries.
she murmured.
Monique
That
blinked.
is something.
Ah,
That
yes,
is
I did.
everything.
He smiled
He shook
faintly.
his head violently.
That was you.
Give
I
me the
thought so.
knife. No,
Collins
I
frowned.
can't start
Sir,
over.
Miss Edwards
You
is here for
can.
the analyst role.
I don't
but
want
as
to.
I was explaining,
She cupped
her
his face,
situation
thumbs
might make
brushing
the job
away
a
tears
difficult
he
fit.
didn't realize were falling.
Dennis's tone
You're
changed
more than your
slightly.
money,
Not
she said
unkind,
softly.
but firm.
More than
And
your
her
company.
situation
More than the
is
power you think
she's a
defines
single
you.
mother. She brought
he closed
her
his
child to the
eyes,
interview.
trembling. She
Dennis
leaned
looked
closer,
at Monique again,
her forehead
his
touching
expression
his.
unreadable.
You don't
And
have
yet
to be
she
strong
still showed
tonight.
up on time,
Just breathe
well prepared,
and stay with me.
I assume
Her
qualified.
voice wrapped around
Collins
him like a
hesitated.
lifeline.
Well,
Slowly,
yes,
painfully,
but
he let
then
the
I'd
knife
say
go.
that's a
She
testament to her
tossed it
discipline,
across the room
not
and
a
exhaled
disqualification.
shakily in relief.
Silence filled
Come
the
on,
room.
she whispered,
Dennis turned to Monique.
slipping an arm around
If you
his
don't
shoulders.
mind, Miss Edwards,
Let's get
I'd
you
like
up.
to hear your
He
thoughts on our
tried to
company's
stand,
stagnating growth.
swayed,
You've
and
done
collapsed
consulting.
against her.
What would you change?
She didn't flinch.
It was the
She
kind
held
of
him,
question that could
really
crush
held
an
him,
unprepared
like
candidate.
she had known him
but
her
Monique
whole
straightened,
life.
eyes bright.
She guided him to the bathroom,
I'd start by
turned on the
listening,
shower
she
till
said.
it ran warm,
You've got
and
great
sat him
talent,
on the edge
but
of
your
the tub.
structure is
He
too
stared
rigid.
at her in disbelief.
People work in fear
You
of
should
failure
leave,
instead
he
of for
muttered.
innovation.
This isn't your
You need
problem.
a culture shift,
She knelt,
not just a
wiping
revenue
the bourbon
plan.
from his jaw with
Dennis
a washcloth.
smiled, the kind
It
of
became
smile
my
that revealed
problem
both
the moment I
surprise
saw you
and
trying to hurt
admiration.
yourself, she
I
said
couldn't
softly.
have said it better.
I don't walk
He
away
closed the
from
folder in
people who
front
are
of her.
breaking.
Welcome
He
to Turner
swallowed
and
hard.
Reed, Miss Edwards.
He wasn't
You'll
used
start
to
Monday.
kindness, especially
Collins
not
looked
now.
as if someone had just
especially
taken
not
the
from
air out of
someone
the
who
room.
owed him nothing.
Monique blinked.
After
Sir,
cleaning him
I
up,
thank you.
she helped
I
him
won't
drink
let you
water,
down.
guided him
Dennis
back to the
nodded
living
once.
room,
I
and
don't
sat with
think
him
you
on the
will.
floor,
As
her
he
back
left the
against
room,
the couch,
Kayla
his
looked up
head
from her
resting
drawing.
on his knees
Mommy,
beside her.
was that the
They
boss?
didn't talk.
Monique
they didn't
smiled
need to.
through the whirlwind
the
in her
silence
chest.
between them
Yes,
was
baby,
strangely
that was
soft.
the boss.
Minutes
Kayla
passed,
grinned.
maybe
He was
hours.
nice.
Finally,
Outside
with
the
a
building,
shaky breath,
the cold
he
air
whispered,
hit her cheeks.
"Thank you."
Monique held
She
Kayla's
gave him
hand
a
tightly,
small,
her heart
gentle nod.
still racing.
Eventually,
You did it,
exhaustion
Mommy,
pulled him
Kayla
under.
said,
He
bouncing on
drifted
her
asleep
toes.
with his head
Monique
resting near
laughed
her
softly,
thigh,
the
breathing
sound trembling
unevenly
on the edge of
but
tears.
alive.
We did
Morning
it,
light
sweetheart.
poured into the living
She looked
room.
back at the
Sharon
tower of
sat
glass
beside
behind
him,
her,
still,
sunlight
legs
glinting
crossed,
off its surface.
laptop open
Somewhere
on her lap.
high above,
She
Dennis
hadn't
Turner
left.
was probably
Nicholas
back in his
stirred,
office,
embarrassed
drinking coffee,
the moment he
reading
realized
reports.
where he was
Yet his
and who
words
was
lingered
beside
in
him.
her mind.
"I'm
You
sorry,"
showed up.
he said
You
quietly,
were prepared.
pushing himself up.
For the first
"You
time
shouldn't
in years,
have seen any
she
of
felt
that."
seen.
"I'm glad
not
I
as a
did,"
burden,
she replied.
not as a statistic,
"Otherwise, you
but
wouldn't
as a
be here."
woman capable
He looked
of
away,
rebuilding her
shame
life.
tightening his throat.
That evening,
She closed
Dennis
her
stood
laptop.
by his office window.
"Before you
The
spiral
city
again,
sprawled
can I
beneath
ask you
him in a
something?"
sea of
He nodded
golden
stiffly.
lights. His
"Your
assistant
system
had
didn't
dropped
crash
her
on its
file
own,"
off on his
she
desk.
said calmly.
He hadn't meant to
Someone
open
sabotaged
but
it.
curiosity
He
won.
scoffed.
Monique
Impossible.
Edwards,
I had the
30
best
years old,
tech experts
Tulane
money
University
could buy.
graduate,
And
former
yet,
data
she
strategist,
said, raising
left
a brow,
the workforce after
one
childbirth.
breach took
A
down
single
the
mother
entire
who helped
empire.
a stranger on the street
He frowned.
and faced
She
condescension
pushed the
without
laptop toward
flinching.
him.
He set the
Encrypted
file
anomalies
down, his
filled the
reflection
screen.
ghosted
Lines of
against the
code
glass.
highlighted,
For a
backdoor
long
entries
moment,
exposed,
he simply stared at the
timestamps
skyline.
showing the exact
He wasn't
moment
sure
the
why
betrayal
she lingered
occurred.
in his thoughts.
This
Maybe
isn't
it was
an
the way
accident,
she spoke,
she said
or the
softly.
strength beneath
Someone
her calm.
did this to
Maybe
you
it was
on
the
purpose.
way she carried herself.
He stared at
Dignity
her,
intact,
confused,
even
a
when
little
the world
shaken.
had given her
How
every
do you
reason
even
to
know
fall
this?
apart.
He whispered.
Whatever it was,
She shrugged
he knew
lightly.
this much.
I studied
Something had shifted
cybersecurity.
today.
I analyzed
Meanwhile,
systems for
in
fun.
a small apartment
Your
in
security
Harlem,
was
Monique
good,
tucked
but
Kayla
not as
into
good
bed.
as you thought.
The hum
He
of the
blinked.
city filled the
She held
quiet.
his gaze steadily.
Mommy?
No
Yes,
fear,
sweetheart.
no
Do
hesitation,
you think that
just
man,
quiet
the boss,
intelligence.
is an angel?
And in that
Monique
moment, he
chuckled
realized
softly.
something
An
startling.
angel? Why would
The
you
young
think that?
woman he had
Because
dismissed
he
the
helped
night
you.
before,
He saw
the woman
you.
he had nearly
Monique
died in front
paused,
of,
her
the
throat
woman
tightening.
who saved his
Maybe
life,
he's just
was
a
the
good
only
man.
person alive who
Kayla
could save
smiled
his company
sleepily.
too.
Good men are angels
Sharon,
too.
what exactly
Monique
did you
leaned
just
down
find?
and kissed her
He
forehead.
whispered.
Then maybe
She looked
he
back
is.
at the screen,
She turned
eyes
off the
narrowing.
lamp and stood by the
Proof,
window
she
for a
said.
moment,
watching
that
the city
someone you
lights blur
trusted
into stars.
betrayed you.
Somewhere out there,
And Nicholas
fate
Wilson
had
felt the
begun to
first
turn
spark of something
quietly,
he hadn't felt
gently,
in months.
like the first
Hope.
flicker of dawn.
Morning
And though she
sunlight
didn't know
streamed
it
through
yet,
the penthouse
the man
windows,
who saw her
painting
today
soft
would
gold
one day
across the
love
marble
her
floors.
enough to change
Nicholas
both
sat on the
their
edge of the
lives
sofa,
forever.
hunched forward,
6
elbows on
months
his
had
knees,
passed since that
staring
morning,
at the open
the morning
laptop
that
Sharon had placed on the glass
rhythm
table.
of Monique's life.
The caffeine from
Now
the
she
untouched
was the
coffee she had
quiet
made for him
force
earlier
behind
had
Turner
already
and
gone
Reed's
cold,
revival.
but he had not
Charts that
moved
once
in
sank
10
were
full
climbing.
minutes.
Clients
His
who had
eyes were
drifted
locked
away
on the
were
code.
returning.
Thousands
and her
of lines,
ideas,
dozens
sharp,
of entries,
human,
each
alive,
revealing something
were changing
darker
the
than the
language
last.
of the company.
Sharon
And
sat
yet,
beside
every
him
time
barefoot,
she stepped
legs
into the
folded
executive
beneath her,
wing, she
her
could feel
presence
Dennis Turner's
unexpectedly
presence
calming in the
before she
chaos
saw
of his
him.
unraveling life.
It was a Tuesday morning.
She pointed
The
at the
boardroom
timestamp
was
with her
filled
index
with
finger.
tension and the scent of
This
fresh
right
espresso.
here,
she said
Executives
softly,
debated over
is the
quarterly
script that
forecasts,
started
voices
everything.
rising like static.
his jaw tightened.
Dennis sat at the head
This
of the
came
table,
from
calm
inside
and
the
measured,
company.
until Monique
Yes,
spoke.
she whispered.
If we
and
focus on
someone
numbers
who had
without
access to your
understanding
core
people,
system,
she said,
not
her
an
voice
outsider,
steady but
not
firm,
a hacker,
will
someone
always
in
chase
your
growth
circle.
instead of
He
building
dragged
it.
a hand through his
The
hair,
room fell
fingers
quiet.
trembling.
Dennis looked
My
at her,
circle
the
was
faintest
less than
smile
15
at the corner
people.
of his lips.
Then it's
What do you
one of the
propose?
15. Sharon
Monique
replied,
clicked to the
voice
next
steady
slide.
but gentle.
Listen to
Someone
your team.
close.
Reward
He
creativity,
exhaled sharply,
not just
the
results.
sound breaking
People
halfway.
fight harder when
Betrayal
they feel seen.
already hurt.
He nodded
but
slowly.
betrayal from
Continue.
someone within his
She
inner
did.
world.
For the next
that was a
15
different
minutes,
kind of knife.
every person in that
Sharon
room
watched him
listened.
quietly.
When
she
she
did not
finished,
push.
Dennis said
she did
simply,
not tell him to be
"That's our
strong.
new strategy."
She just stayed.
Afterward,
Last
as the room
night,
emptied,
he
Dennis
said slowly,
lingered. "Brilliant
I thought
work,"
I had
he said
nothing
quietly.
left. She
Monique
turned to
smiled,
him.
adjusting
you were
her
in
files.
pain.
"Thank
That's
you.
an
I
excuse,
just did what needed to
he
be done."
muttered. No,
He studied
she
her for a
corrected,
moment.
voice
The
soft
faint
but firm.
tiredness under her
That's
eyes,
human.
the way she
he
hid
looked
her
at her,
exhaustion
surprised
behind
by her
grace.
gentleness.
You do
the
that a
stubborn
lot,
part of
don't
him
you?
wanted to
What?
argue, but the
Carry
truth
the
was
weight
he
and
did
call it
not have
duty.
the energy to
Her
pretend
heart
he was
skipped.
fine.
She
How
wasn't
long
used to
did you
being
stay
seen
here?
so clearly.
He asked.
I
All
guess
night.
I've had practice.
He blinked. Why?
He smiled faintly.
She held his
You
gaze,
make it look
no
easy.
hesitation,
It's not.
no embarrassment.
He nodded,
Because
his
you
voice
needed
softening.
someone to stay.
If you ever need
the
help,
words
you
hit
know
him
my door's
harder
open.
than anything he
She
had
gave
heard
him
in
a
months.
polite smile.
They spent
"Thank
the
you,
next
Mr.
hour
Turner,
digging
but
deeper.
I'm used to standing
Sharon
on my own
typed
2
quickly,
feet."
moving through
He looked
lines
at
of
her for a
encrypted
long
code
moment,
like someone
then
who
said
had lived
quietly,
inside computer
"Maybe
systems
that's the
since birth.
problem."
Nicholas
Before she
found
could
himself
respond,
watching
he walked
her
out,
more than the
leaving
screen.
behind a
Her
silence that
concentration,
lingered
the
long
way her
after the
eyebrow
echo of his
arched
footsteps
slightly when
faded.
something did not make
That
sense.
night,
the
Monique
faint
worked
crease
late.
in her
The
forehead
city
as she
outside
scanned
was a
deeper.
blur of golden
How did you
glass.
learn all this?
Kayla
he
was at
asked.
her neighbor's
Sharon
for a
shrugged.
sleepover,
I
which
didn't
meant
have
the apartment
expensive
would be
tutors
empty
or
when
a
she got
famous
home.
last name.
She rubbed
Just
her
tech
eyes,
groups,
staring
midnight
at the glow
coffee,
of her
and a
computer
whole
screen
lot of
when the
determination.
elevator door
He
opened.
stared at her.
Dennis stepped
he,
out,
born into
jacket
privilege,
off,
had
sleeves
spent
rolled
millions
up,
building a
looking
team
nothing
he
like the
believed
CEO
unmatched.
everyone else
Yet the
feared.
woman who
"You're
cracked the
still here,"
impossible
he said,
sat
walking
beside him
closer.
in a simple black
Monique
t-shirt,
turned in her chair,
unbothered by the
startled.
chaos he was
"So are
drowning in.
you?"
Hair
"I could
pulled
say
into
I
a
came
loose
to check
bun,
on the reports,"
skin
he
glowing
said,
softly
"but
in the
that'd
morning
be a
light.
lie."
Nicholas
She arched a
swallowed.
brow.
You're
"So why did you come?"
extraordinary. She
He met her
paused,
gaze.
fingers
"To
hovering
make
above
sure
the keyboard.
you're not carrying
I'm just
the whole
good at what
company
I
on your
love.
back again."
No,
She
he
laughed
said quietly.
softly. "I'm
You're
fine.
extraordinary.
I know you
Her
always
cheeks
are."
warmed,
He
and
leaned
she
against
looked
the
back
edge
at the
of her
screen
desk,
to
watching
escape the
her.
intensity
But
of his
it's
gaze.
okay to not
Hours
be
passed.
sometimes.
Together, they
There was
uncovered
something
the
in his
pattern,
voice,
a back
gentle
door
and
planted
unguarded,
months
that made
earlier,
her chest
used
tighten.
strategically over
"Dennis,"
time to
she began,
destabilize
his
the
name
entire
strange,
system.
but warm
It's
on her
someone
tongue.
with long-term
"I can't
access,
afford
Sharon
distractions.
murmured.
Not
Someone
here."
who knows the architecture of
"Distraction?"
your code
He
base.
smiled faintly.
Someone
"Is
patient.
that what I am?"
Someone I
She looked
trusted.
away,
Nicholas
flustered.
said,
"You're my
the bitter
boss.
taste rising in
And
his
you're
throat.
the most
Sharon studied him
extraordinary
carefully.
woman I've ever
Do
met."
you have a name in mind?
Her heart trembled.
He did not
"Don't."
answer. Not immediately,
not?
but his silence
Because
told
men
her
say
enough.
things they
As
don't
evening
mean.
approached,
Her
Nicholas
voice
walked to the
cracked
balcony
raw,
for air.
too honest.
Miami
Miami's
And when
warm
they
breeze
leave,
brushed
women
over
like
his skin,
me are left
fragrant with
cleaning up
salt
the
water
mess.
and humidity.
Dennis
His
stepped
empire,
closer,
the Wilson
lowering
Tower,
his voice.
stood tall
I'm
but
not
silently
him, Monique.
wounded behind
You
him.
don't even know me.
Sharon joined him quietly,
I do.
stepping
I've watched
outside
you
on bare
fight
feet
through
again,
every storm
leaning
and
against the
never
railing
lose your
just a
kindness.
few inches from
I've
him.
watched you make this
You don't
company
look okay,
breathe again.
she said
And
softly.
I've watched you
I'm
walk
not.
out every
You don't have
night
to pretend
alone,
with me.
pretending
He turned to
you
her,
don't deserve
genuinely
to be loved.
confused. Why
Her
are you
throat
doing
tightened.
this?
That's
Doing
not
what?
fair.
Helping me?
It's the truth.
Staying? Caring?
She stood,
His voice
suddenly
cracked.
needing space.
You didn't have to.
You can't say
She
things
looked
like
at him,
that.
not as the
He took
billionaire,
a slow
not
breath,
as the
trying to
CEO,
study the
not
air
as the man
between them.
whose name commanded
Then I'll
rooms
stop
and
talking.
deals, But
Before
as a
she could
person,
ask what he meant,
my mother
he
raised me
leaned
to
in,
help people
not to
who are
kiss her,
hurting.
not
She
yet,
said quietly,
but close
you
enough
are
for her to
hurting
feel
more
the
than
heat of
anyone
his
I've
breath.
ever seen.
Tell me to go,
His throat tightened,
he whispered.
and she added,
She
her voice
hesitated.
lowering,
Her pulse
everyone
thundered.
deserves at least
Every
one
part of her
person
wanted
who
to
doesn't
lean
walk
into
away
the
when
warmth
things
she'd
fall
denied
apart.
herself for years.
Nicholas closed his
But
eyes
fear
briefly.
won.
Those
Go,
words
she
hit
whispered.
a place in him he had
He nodded
buried for
once,
decades.
stepped back,
My
and walked
parents
away.
never stayed.
The
he
elevator
murmured.
doors
Not
closed
once.
with a soft
They didn't
chime.
even come when I
Monique
launched my
stood there
first company.
trembling, the scent
Sharon
of his
turned
cologne
fully toward
lingering
him,
like
face
memory.
softening. You
Days
grew up
passed,
alone,
and she threw herself
except for
deeper
Patricia.
into work.
He admitted,
but the tension
she was
between
everything.
them only grew stronger.
She still is.
Quiet glances,
Sharon said with a
brief
small
touches,
smile.
words
He
that
glanced
said
at her,
too
a
much.
faint ache forming
At a
in his
charity
chest.
gala that Friday,
You and your
Monique
mother,
arrived in
you're
an
the
emerald
only
dress
people
that
who've
seemed
shown
to
me
catch
kindness
every
in
flicker
years.
of light.
Sharon's
She
expression
to
softened
attend,
further.
but Dennis had
I'm not
asked her
showing
personally.
you kindness, she
When
said
he saw
quietly.
her enter the
He
ballroom,
frowned.
his breath
Then what are you
caught.
doing?
She looked like
I'm
the kind
showing
of
you
miracle
humanity,
life
she
rarely
whispered.
offered twice.
Something you forgot
He crossed
you deserved.
the room to meet her.
The words
You-
knocked the
his
breath
voice
out of
faltered.
him. No
Incredible.
employee had ever
Thank you,
spoken to him
she
like
said,
that.
her tone
No
soft
partner,
but
no
careful.
friend, because
They
he did
danced
not
later,
have many.
slow and
But
hesitant.
Sharon was not
The room
afraid of
glowed
him.
with champagne
She was
laughter,
not
the hum
intimidated
of
by his
violins,
status
and
or
the
his
quiet
fall.
ache of two
She
people
saw him
trying not to
messy,
fall.
ruined,
You shouldn't
bleeding on
look
the
at me like
inside,
that,
and
she
still
whispered.
chose to
Like
stay.
what?
He
Like
swallowed
you mean
hard.
it.
You don't
lips
know what this
curved
means
faintly.
to me.
That's
She
the
looked
only
out
way
at the
I know how.
skyline, voice soft.
She looked away.
I don't need
blinking
to.
fast.
It's enough
You
that
don't
you're
understand,
trying.
Dennis.
Trying.
I can't afford to
He wasn't
lose
sure
myself
he
again.
was,
Not
but the
when I
way
have
she
Kayla.
said the word
Not
made
when
him
I've just
feel like
started to
maybe
stand
he
on my
could.
own.
Later that
nodded,
night,
his
they
voice
sat
gentle.
at opposite ends
So
of the
I'm not
sofa,
asking you to
laptops
lose
open,
yourself.
screens
I'm
glowing
asking
in
you
the
to
dim
let me
room.
walk beside
You
you.
need to sleep,
Her
Sharon
hand
murmured.
tightened in his.
But what if I
You
stay
make it
working
sound
with you
so
until your
easy.
mind slows
It's
down?
not easy,
He smiled
said.
weakly.
It's love.
You don't have to
It never
babysit
is.
me. She
The
lifted
song
an
ended,
eyebrow.
but they didn't
I didn't
move
say
apart immediately.
babysit. I
The
said
world around
stay.
them blurred.
For a man who had been
Chandeliers,
abandoned
music,
only
laughter,
hours before,
fading into something
those words
softer.
were enough
For
to
a
keep
moment,
him breathing.
she imagined what
He
it would
nodded.
be like to
Sharon
stop
scooted
fighting,
closer,
to
placing
let
her
him
laptop
in,
beside
to
his.
believe that maybe
Here,
this
she
time
said gently,
love wouldn't
breathe
leave her
with me.
behind.
He
Then the
blinked.
applause
What?
snapped her back.
Just
She
do
pulled
it.
away,
You're stressed.
murmuring,
She
"I should
inhaled
go."
deeply.
Monique,
out,
he said softly,
slowly,
but she shook
it
her
was
head.
absurd.
Please,
he was a
she
grown
said,
man,
her voice
a CEO,
trembling.
a
Don't
man who
make me
commanded
believe in
thousands.
something I can't have.
But the moment she inhaled
He
again,
didn't stop her.
he found
He just
himself
watched her
following,
walk away.
slow,
The crowd
deep,
parting
steady.
around her like mist.
Something inside
until
him
she
loosened.
disappeared through the glass
You're
doors
good at
and
calming
into the
people,
New York night.
he whispered.
Later
you
that
needed
evening,
grounding,
she
she
stood
replied.
alone on her
I saw it
apartment balcony.
earlier.
The
What did you
city
see?
glittered beneath
You
her,
shaking,
alive
she said,
and distant.
and pretending you
Kayla
weren't.
was asleep inside.
He closed his laptop.
Her little snores
You
muffled
read me
under
too
blankets.
easily.
Monique
That's
wrapped
because
her
you've been
arms around
carrying
herself,
too much for too
fighting
long,
the ache
she
that
murmured.
wouldn't leave.
He looked at her,
She thought of
really
Dennis,
looked,
his voice,
and something
his eyes,
inside him shifted.
the gentleness
a
that scared
connection,
her more
a
than
pull,
cruelty
a
ever
quiet
had.
gravity
She
drawing
had
him
loved
toward
once.
her.
She had
He
believed
didn't understand
once.
it,
And when
but he
that
felt
love
it.
had shattered,
Sharon,
she promised herself
he whispered,
never
unsure
again.
what he wanted
But
to say
Dennis,
next.
he didn't feel
Yes,
like the others.
you're different.
He wasn't
She
charming
smiled
her
faintly.
with promises.
And you're
He was
not as
simply
cold
there,
as you pretend.
steady,
He laughed
patient,
softly,
waiting.
a sound he had
Her
not
phone
made
buzzed.
in months.
A message from
she
him
closed
read,
her laptop
"I'll
as
never
well.
push, but
Nicholas,
I'll never stop
she said
caring
gently,
either.
I
Good
know
night,
today
Monique."
has been brutal.
She closed
I
her
know
eyes,
the betrayal
a tear
cuts
slipping
deep,
down her
but
cheek.
you're not alone
For the
in
first
this.
time in years,
not anymore.
she didn't feel alone.
His breath caught.
In
no
his
one had
penthouse across
ever
the
said
city,
those words to him.
Dennis stood
Never.
by his window,
Not
staring
once.
out into the light.
He swallowed
that
hard.
seemed endless.
Why does it
He
matter
thought
to
of
you?
her. Her
She held
fire,
his gaze
her
without
grace,
flinching.
her fierce
Because
independence.
no one deserves
He
to
had
drown,
everything
she
money could
whispered.
buy,
And
but
if I
nothing
can help
that
you
ever
swim,
felt like
even
peace.
for a moment,
Until
then that's
her,
enough.
he whispered to the
The
empty
air
room.
shifted.
I'll
He
wait
felt
for
it
you,
in his
however
chest,
long
in
it
the
takes.
ache behind his
And
ribs,
in another
in
part
the
of the same
quiet
city,
gratitude
a woman
tightening
who
his throat.
swore she'd
He
never
whispered,
trust
soft love
Thank
again.
you.
Whispered
She
to the
touched
night,
his hand lightly.
Please,
Just
don't
one
make me
soft
hope.
touch, and something
Neither knew it
electric
yet,
passed
but
between
hope,
them.
quiet,
You're welcome,
patient,
she said softly.
stubborn,
They
had
sat like
already
that,
begun to take
close,
root between
quiet,
them.
breathing
November
in the
had
same
arrived
slow
again,
rhythm,
colder
until
this time.
exhaustion
The kind of
finally
cold
pulled him
that
under.
carried loneliness
Her
in its
presence
breath.
beside him was the
The city
last
was
thing he
wrapped in
felt
its
before sleep
pre-holiday
claimed
rush.
him. And for the
Lights
first
blooming
time
in
since
every
his world
window,
collapsed,
laughter
Nicholas
spilling
Wilson
from cafes
didn't
and
feel
corners where
completely
love
alone.
lived easily. The
But
Miami
inside
heat
Monique's
clung to the
apartment,
windows
the
of
world
Nicholas's
felt
glass
smaller,
tower.
quieter.
But inside his office,
She sat at her
it
kitchen
was
table,
a different kind
bills
of warmth.
spread out before
Sharon
her like
sat across from him,
accusations.
glowing under the
rent had
soft
gone
light
up
of the desk
again.
lamp,
Groceries
tapping on her
cost
laptop
more,
with
and the
effortless
heater
precision.
made that tired
3 months
sound
had
that meant
passed
it
since the
might
night
give
she
out
saved
any
him.
day now.
You are listening to a
Kayla
narrated
was coloring
story on the
beside her,
MangaLove
humming
channel.
softly,
Don't forget to share your
unaware
thoughts
of the
about today's
storm
story.
that kept her mother's chest
3
tight.
months of quiet companionship,
rubbed her temple
slow
and
healing,
whispered under
and
her breath,
late-night coding sessions
okay.
that stretched
You're
into
okay.
sunrise.
But she
3
wasn't
months
sure
of
she
watching
was.
Sharon bring
At
his
work,
system
she was
back to life,
unstoppable,
brick
sharp,
by digital
confident,
brick, until his
indispensable.
company not
At
only
home,
recovered,
she was a
but
woman
rose
balancing on the
stronger,
edge of
smarter,
exhaustion,
cleaner than
trying
ever
to give
before.
her daughter a
3
childhood
months
that
of
didn't
falling
feel
for
like
her.
survival.
And now, watching
And
her sitting
lately,
there,
Dennis
hair
Turner's
tied up,
presence had
lips
become the
pursed in
quiet ache she
concentration,
couldn't ignore.
Nicholas realized
He
something
hadn't pushed her since
terrifying.
that night at the
He
gala.
loved her.
He hadn't
Not in the
flirted or
casual
crossed
passing
lines,
way he had
but he
loved
was
women
there in
before.
small
Not in the
gestures
shallow
that said
way his
everything
wealth
words
had attracted
couldn't.
attention.
An extra
Not
coffee
in
on
the
her
way
desk
that
every
faded
morning,
after a
an
few
umbrella
weeks.
waiting by
No,
her chair
this
when it rained.
was deeper.
Notes
This
that
was
simply
slow
said,
and
"I
violent
believe in
and
you."
consuming.
You are
like
listening to a
something had
narrated
reached
story on
inside
the
his
MangaLove
chest
channel.
and
Don't forget to
rewritten
share
who
your
he
thoughts
was.
about today's story.
He stared at her a moment
She told
too
herself
long.
it was kindness.
Sharon glanced
she told
up.
herself
You're
not
doing
to
it
read
again.
into it.
Doing
But
what?
every time
he asked,
he looked at
pretending
her,
to focus on
truly
his own
looked,
screen.
something inside
Staring
her
like
shifted,
you're analyzing
like
an
a
error
door
code.
she'd bolted shut
He smiled
was beginning
softly.
to open.
Maybe I am.
Mommy?
She raised a brow.
Monique
and what
blinked,
did your analysis
realizing she'd
reveal?
been staring at the
That
same
I owe
bill
you
for
more
10
than
minutes.
I can ever repay,
Yes, sweetheart?
he murmured.
Are we
Her
having
expression
Thanksgiving
softened,
this year?
but she quickly
Monique
looked
smiled
away.
faintly.
Don't
Of
make it
course
dramatic,
we are,
she said
just
lightly.
like always.
You did all the heavy
But
lifting.
last year we
you
went to Auntie
rebuilt my
Pam's,
company,
and she
he
said her
said, voice
oven
low.
broke, remember?
You rebuilt
Yes,
yourself,
and
she
we ended up
countered.
eating Chinese
He swallowed
takeout.
hard.
Kayla giggled.
Later that night,
That was
after
fun.
Patricia brought dinner
Monique
and left
reached
them with
over and
enough
tucked a
food to
curl
feed an
behind her
entire
daughter's ear.
boardroom, Nicholas
Then maybe
watched
we'll do
Sharon
that again
pack
this
her
year.
laptop into her bag.
Kayla grew
Are you leaving
quiet,
early?
thinking.
He asked.
Then asked
It's
softly,
10:45 p.m.,
"Can we
Nicholas.
invite Mr.
Right,
Turner?"
he said, cheeks
The
warming.
question caught
I
Monique
forgot
off
what
guard.
normal hours look
Mr.
like.
Turner?
She
Why
slung
would
her
you
bag
say
over
that?
her shoulder.
Because
You'll be
you
okay.
smile when he
He
calls,
nodded,
Kayla
but
said simply,
something in him
and
tightened.
he looks at you like
He
he
didn't
wants you
want
to be
her
happy.
to leave. Not
Monique's
tonight.
heart
Not when
squeezed.
everything inside him
Sweetheart,
felt
Mr.
too
Turner
full,
is my
too
boss.
tangled,
He's
too
busy.
loud.
People
He
like
stood
him
abruptly.
don't have time
Sharon.
for little dinners like
She
ours.
paused at the door and
Kayla
turned.
frowned.
The way
That's
she
not
looked
true.
at him,
Maybe he
patient,
just needs someone to
warm,
ask.
unafraid,
Monique
made
chuckled.
his next words
Well,
shake.
you can ask him
There's
if you like.
something I need to tell
Kayla's
you,
eyes
he
brightened.
said.
The
She
kind of
stepped
spark
closer,
that always
concern
made
in her
Monique
eyes.
nervous
What's
because
wrong?
it meant her daughter
His
was
throat
already
felt
planning
too tight.
something.
He had
The next day,
negotiated
while Monique
billion-dollar
was in a
deals,
meeting,
confronted
Dennis's assistant
investors,
brought in a
survived
sealed
being
envelope
dragged through
addressed in
international
childish
headlines,
handwriting.
but
To
confessing
Mr.
to
Turner,
Sharon
it
Mark,
read, with
he
a small
felt
heart
18
drawn
again,
beside it.
nervous,
He smiled,
clumsy,
curious,
bare
and
human.
opened it carefully.
I'm in love with you,
Inside was a
he said
short letter
quietly.
written in purple
Silence
crayon.
slammed into the
Dear
room
Mr.
like a
Turner,
gust of wind.
Hi, it's
Sharon
Kayla.
blinked
I hope
once,
it's okay that I'm
twice.
writing to you.
Nicholas,
Mommy doesn't
she
know.
whispered,
Mommy
almost
works
pained.
all the time.
Don't.
Sometimes
It's
she
not
forgets
sudden,
to eat,
he said
and
quickly.
I have to put a blanket
It's been
on her when
months.
she falls
I
asleep
fought
at the
it.
table.
I tried to hide
she
it.
says she's
I
not
tried
tired,
to pretend
but
you
I
were
know
just
she
my
is.
savior,
She's been
my
tired for a
teammate,
long
my
time.
partner. But
When she
you're
talks
more
about
than
work,
all of
she
that.
smiles differently.
She looked away,
like she
pulse
forgets to be
flickering in
sad.
her neck.
I think
He
you
stepped
make
closer,
her feel that way.
voice soft
You're the
but
only
trembling.
person who makes
You
her laugh
showed
like
me
she
what
used
kindness
to.
feels
I
like,
like when she
what
laughs.
honesty
The
feels
house
like,
feels warm
what
when
life
she does.
feels like
We are
outside
having
of power
Thanksgiving
and
at home.
money.
Just
When
me
I'm
and
with
Mommy.
you,
It's
I'm
not
not the
fancy,
ruined
but
billionaire.
I saved you a
I'm
seat.
just me.
I think you should
Her
come.
eyes glanced
Maybe
over,
if you
but
do,
she shook her head.
Mommy will smile
Nicholas,
like that again.
I can't.
Love,
I can't
Kayla.
be that for you.
Dennis read
He
it
froze.
twice, then
Why?
a third time.
She whispered.
His vision blurring
Because,
halfway through.
she said, voice
he
shaking.
sat back in his
You're
chair,
rebuilding
pressing
your
the
life.
letter to his
You're
chest,
healing.
overcome
You're
by
vulnerable.
something raw
You're still
and
hurting.
unexpected.
And I
He'd
won't let
closed
myself
deals
be the
worth
woman you
millions
latch
without
onto
flinching. just because
But
I happened to be standing there
undid
when
him.
everything
A
fell
child's
apart.
letter, a
His
small
heart
apartment,
cracked.
a mother
I'm not
too
latching
proud
onto
to ask
you,
for help.
he said.
He reached
I
for
love
his
who
phone,
you are,
his voice
not
quiet
just
when
what
his
you
assistant
did.
answered,
Nicholas,
"Cancel
she
my dinner
exhaled
reservation
shakily.
for Thursday.
You don't
I
understand.
have somewhere else to be."
You're the CEO of
Thanksgiving
a billion-dollar
evening came
company
quietly.
again.
The
And
sky was
I'm your
already
Sharon,
dark by
he
5,
said firmly,
the wind
stepping
sharp
closer.
against the glass.
The most brilliant
Monique had
woman
spent the
I've
afternoon
ever met.
cooking. roasted
lashes
chicken
fluttered,
instead of turkey,
but she
mashed
still shook her
potatoes,
head.
and the sweet potato
I can't
pie
risk
her
it,
mother used
she
to make.
whispered.
She
I
wasn't
can't risk
expecting guests.
losing myself
She
in
didn't know
someone
about the
who's
letter.
still figuring
She had
out who
just
he
set
is.
the table, 2
He
plates,
swallowed.
2 glasses.
The rejection
when there was a
landed
knock on the
softly
door.
but painfully.
Mommy, someone's here.
Okay,
Kayla squealed,
he murmured,
racing
voice
to open
barely
it.
audible.
Monique frowned.
I hear you.
Sweetheart, wait.
Her eyes
The
softened
door
with
swung
guilt.
open.
But
Dennis
I
stood
need
there,
you to
holding
know,
a small
she added,
bouquet of lilies
that I
and a
care about you
store-bought pie.
deeply.
His hair
I just
slightly
can't
tousled
cross
from the
that
wind.
line.
He looked
He nodded
nothing
slowly,
like the CEO
forcing a
who
breath
commanded
past the
boardrooms.
ache in his
Just
chest.
a man standing
Good night,
awkwardly
Nicholas,
in a hallway,
she whispered.
holding hope in his
He
hands.
watched her walk to the
Mr.
elevator,
Turner,
watched
Monique
the doors
gasped.
close,
What are
watched
you?
everything
Kayla
inside him
invited me,
shatter
he
with
said
quiet
gently,
dignity.
handing her the letter.
But
I
Nicholas
couldn't say
Wilson
no.
had never been a
Monique
man who
turned
gave
to
up
her daughter,
easily.
who smiled
And when it
up at
came
her,
to Sharon,
completely
giving
unbothered.
up wasn't
You
an
said
option.
I could ask.
The next
Dennis
day, he
smiled
showed up
softly.
at her apartment
May I
building
come in?
at 7 a.m.
She
She stepped
hesitated
out of her
only a
door,
second
startled.
before nodding. Of
Nicholas,
course,
what
come
are you?
in.
He handed
The
her a
warmth
cup
of the
coffee.
apartment wrapped around
Double
him as he
caramel
entered.
latte, he said
It smelled
softly.
like cinnamon,
2 pumps,
roasted chicken,
extra foam,
and something
no
else,
sugar. Like
something
you like
that
it.
felt like home.
Her lips parted.
Dinner was simple,
You don't have to
imperfect,
do this,
and beautiful.
she said. I
Kayla
want
told
to,
stories
he
about
answered.
school, about
He
the
did it
class
again
hamster
the next
and her
day,
drawings,
and the next,
about how her
and the
mom
next.
made the best
But
pancakes
he
in the
never
world.
pressured her,
Dennis
never
listened
begged,
with genuine
never
delight,
crossed a boundary.
laughing easily.
He just
Monique,
showed up,
at first
quiet,
tense,
gentle,
began to relax.
consistent.
The way
At
Dennis
work,
spoke
he
to
left
Kayla,
handwritten
gentle,
notes on her desk.
attentive,
Thank you
melted something
again
in
for
her.
everything.
He didn't
Hope
talk
today
at
feels
her.
light.
He listened.
You make
like
the world
every
better
word mattered.
just by existing.
After dinner, he helped
Sometimes
clear the
she rolled
dishes,
her eyes,
ignoring her
sometimes
protests.
she smiled
You
without
cooked,
meaning to.
I'll clean.
But every note
When the plates were
softened
washed
something in
and
her.
Kayla had fallen asleep
One
on the
afternoon,
couch,
he
Monique
appeared at her
sat beside
favorite
him.
coding cafe,
The room quiet,
silently sitting
except for
across
the
the room,
faint hum of the
working
heater.
with headphones on.
She wrote
He
you
didn't
that letter
interrupt.
without
He
telling
didn't
me,
hover.
Monique
He
said
just
softly.
wanted to be near
I'm
her.
glad she did.
Sharon
Dennis
found
replied.
her heart betraying her in
smiled,
moments
looking
she
down.
didn't expect.
You must think
Watching
I'm a
him
mess.
laugh with the
Rent's
cafe
going
barista,
up, my
watching
heater's
him
dying,
push his hair back
and now
when
my
he
daughter's
concentrated.
inviting my boss
Watching
over
him
for
carry
dinner.
responsibility
He shook his
with
head.
a new,
I think
humble
you're
softness
extraordinary.
she had never
She
seen
looked
in a
up,
billionaire
startled.
before.
Do you
She
know
tried
how
to fight
rare
it.
it is?
She
He
tried to
continued,
stay
his
guarded.
voice low.
But Nicholas
To meet
Wilson
someone
was
who fights
persistent in the
every
most
day, but
gentle,
still chooses
respectful way
kindness?
possible.
You've
He
built
didn't
a world
chase
for your daughter
he
out of
stayed.
strength
and
and
that
love.
was far more
That's not a
dangerous.
mess, Monique.
2 weeks
That's
later,
grace.
on a crowded
Her throat
Saturday
tightened.
afternoon,
You shouldn't
Sharon
say
crossed
things
a
like
busy
that.
Miami
Why
plaza
not?
on her way to buy
Because I'll
groceries.
start believing
People
them.
were everywhere.
He smiled.
Kids
Good,
running around
because they're
fountains,
true.
couples taking
Silence
photos,
lingered,
music
warm,
blasting from a
fragile.
street performer.
He reached out,
She blended
gently
into the
brushing
crowd
a strand of
effortlessly
hair from her face.
until the
His
music
fingers
stopped,
lingered,
until
just long
murmurs
enough
started
for her to
rising,
feel the
until
tremor beneath
every
the
head
calm.
turned toward
I
the
told
center of the
myself
plaza.
I'd wait, he said
Sharon's
softly.
heart skipped,
But waiting
because
doesn't
standing
stop
on
what I
top of the
feel.
fountain ledge,
Monique's
hair
voice was
wind-tossed,
barely a whisper.
shirt slightly wrinkled,
Dennis,
face
I'm not here
flushed
to
with nervous
rescue you,
courage,
he said.
was Nicholas,
I'm here to stand
holding a
beside
microphone
you,
from
to make
God
sure
knows
you
where.
never have to
Oh
face
no!
anything
Oh
alone
no!
again.
Her
Her
stomach
eyes
dropped.
shone with tears.
Nicholas,
She
what are you
refused to let
doing?
them
She
fall.
whispered under her breath.
You don't know how many
People
times
gathered,
I've wished
phones
someone
came
would
out,
say that
and
mean
Nicholas,
it.
who had
He
once
cupped
been
her
the
cheek, his
coldest,
thumb
most
brushing the
controlled
corner of
man
her
in
lip.
Miami,
I mean
lifted the
every
microphone
word.
to his lips.
And this time,
Hi,
when he leaned
said,
in, she
voice
didn't stop
echoing
him.
across the plaza.
The kiss was slow,
I'm Nicholas Wilson.
hesitant, the
A
kind
wave
that
of
carried
whispers
years
rippled
of
through the crowd.
silence and longing
He
in its
continued,
breath.
voice
It wasn't
steady
desperate.
despite the tremor
It was
she knew was there.
discovery.
I'm
The
here
quiet
today because
realization
there's
that
a woman
love,
I love.
real love had
Sharon
found its way
froze.
back to her.
I tried
When
to
they
tell her
finally
privately,
parted,
he said,
she rested
but
her
she's
forehead
stubborn
against his.
and gentle
You scare
and
me,
too smart
she
for her own
whispered.
good.
He smiled
So I'm
gently.
trying again,
Then we're
publicly,
even.
loudly.
Because
a few
you
people
undo
laughed
me.
fondly. Sharon covered
Later
her
that
face with her
night,
hands.
after he left,
Lord, help
Monique
me.
stood by the window.
But I'll say
her
this
heart
clearly,
still trembling.
Nicholas said, eyes
Kayla's
scanning
letter
the crowd.
lay open on
her
the
name
table.
is Sharon Mark.
She picked it
and
up,
I love
tracing
her.
her daughter's
I love her
handwriting
strength.
with her fingertips.
I love her fire.
The child
I
had
love how
seen
she
something
saved my
before she
life
had.
without ever
Something
asking
she
for
she'd been
anything in
too
return.
afraid to name.
I love who I am when
Outside,
she's
snow
near.
had begun to
I
fall.
love everything.
The first of the season.
The plaza erupted
whispered
with
into the
gasps and
quiet,
applause.
"Thank you,
Sharon's
baby.
eyes stung.
You found
Her
what
pulse
I was
raced.
too afraid
Her
to
knees
reach for."
weakened. People
Across
started
the city,
chanting,
Dennis
"Where is
lay
Sharon?"
awake,
She
staring
stepped
at the
forward
ceiling,
slowly,
the
trembling.
memory of her still
When
on
Nicholas
his
saw
lips.
her, his
For the
breath
first time
stopped.
in years,
He jumped
he
down
wasn't
from the
thinking
ledge
about
and walked
work
toward
or
her like
profit
she
or
was the
deadlines.
only person in
He was
Miami.
thinking about a little
"Sharon,"
girl
he
who'd
said
written a
softly,
letter that changed
gently offering the
everything,
microphone to
and
a
woman
bystander.
whose love,
"I know you
even
said no.
unspoken,
I know
had
you're scared.
already begun
I
to heal
know
him.
I hurt. I know I'm
Winter
imperfect,
in New York
but
had a
I'm
way
not
of
going
making
anywhere.
everything
Not
sharper.
today.
The cold
Not tomorrow.
slicing through
Not
wool
ever.
and steel.
She
the
felt her
light
defenses
turning golden
crumble
and
with
brief
every word.
before the dark
He
swallowed
reached
it
her,
again.
breathing fast.
But that winter,
if all you
something
want from me is
softer
friendship,
lingered in
I'll
Monique
take it.
Edwards'
If you
world.
want distance,
The night
I'll
after
respect it.
Thanksgiving
But I
changed
need you to
everything.
know every
It wasn't
word
the
I
kiss
said
alone,
was real.
though she thought about
Tears
it constantly.
slipped down her cheeks.
Every breath
For the
of it
first
still
time,
caught
she
in her
didn't
memory.
fight them.
It was
Nicholas,
the way Dennis
she
had
whispered.
looked at her after.
Yes.
No
Come
hunger,
here.
no
He blinked.
conquest.
What?
Just
She
quiet
grabbed the front of
certainty.
his shirt and
Like
pulled
he
him
had
down
finally
into a
found
kiss.
what he didn't
Heat,
know he'd
relief,
been searching for.
shock, a
But
thousand
love,
emotions
as Monique
collided
knew,
as the plaza
never
erupted
arrived
around
without
them.
testing its
Nicholas
strength.
froze, then
A
melted,
month later,
kissing
in the
her
soft
back
gray
like she
of
was
January,
air, life,
Monique
salvation.
stood in her living room,
When she
surrounded
finally
by
pulled
boxes.
away, she whispered
the letter
against
from
his
her
lips.
landlord was
I
still
never
pinned to
stopped
the
wanting
fridge.
you.
Rent
I was just
increase
scared.
effective
He brushed
February
a tear
1st.
from her cheek.
It might
I
as
was
well
scared
have been
too.
a countdown clock.
She let out a
She'd
shaky
looked
breath.
for apartments
But
for
you
weeks.
didn't run.
Everything
He smiled,
decent was
forehead
either
against
too
hers.
expensive
I
or
stayed,
too far from
and
Kayla's
I'm
school.
done pushing you
The
away,
reality
she
was
whispered.
simple and
Nicholas
cruel.
exhaled
They
shakily,
were out of time.
pulling her into his chest
Kayla,
as cheers
sitting
rose around
cross-legged
them.
on the floor,
For the
looked
first
up from her
time since his
coloring book.
empire fell,
Are we moving
since his
soon,
life
Mommy?
collapsed,
Monique
since he
smiled
felt he had
faintly,
nothing
trying
left,
to keep her
he
voice
felt
steady.
whole, he felt
Yes,
chosen,
baby. We're
he
just
felt
looking
love.
for the right place.
Miami was painted
Will
in gold
Mr.
that
Turner
morning.
visit us there?
That soft sunrise
question
gold
hit
that
deep.
looked like hope spreading
Maybe,
slowly
she
across
said
the sky.
softly, if we're
Nicholas
lucky.
stood in front of the
The
balcony
truth was,
window,
she
tie in
hadn't
hand,
told him.
heart
Not
pounding
about the
like he'd
rent,
never
not about the
commanded
eviction
billion-dollar
notice tucked
deals
in
in
her
his
purse.
life.
Because
Today
how
wasn't
do
a
you tell the man you're
negotiation.
falling in
Today
love with that
wasn't
you're
an
losing your
empire.
home?
Today was Sharon.
At Turner Holdings,
Today was the
Dennis
woman
noticed
who had
before she said a
rebuilt him
word.
from dust.
He saw
the
the
woman who
fatigue in her
allowed him
eyes,
to find a
the way
version
she
of himself
lingered at her
he
desk
didn't even
long
know
after
existed.
everyone had gone
He
home.
adjusted the tie
He saw her
again,
check her
then
phone
dragged
with
a
that
palm
flicker
down
of
his
dread,
face.
the kind
I
that comes when
rebuilt
you're
a
waiting for bad
corporation
news.
from ashes, he
One
muttered.
evening, he
Why
approached
can't
her
I
as she
tie
was
this
packing
thing
her
right?
bag.
Patricia
You've
laughed
been
softly
quieter
behind
lately,
him,
he said
warm,
gently.
motherly, familiar.
Everything okay?
Because love
She
makes your
forced a
hands
smile.
tremble, Nicholas.
Just a lot
and
on my
that's not a
mind.
weakness.
Monique,
He turned,
said, his
exhaled.
voice dropping to
You've
that
been with
calm,
me since
steady
I was
tone
8,
that
and now
always
here you
disarmed her.
are getting me ready
You
for
don't
my
have
wedding.
to do this alone.
Patricia straightened the
Something in
tie
her
gently,
cracked.
eyes misty.
I'm losing the
You
apartment,
deserve
she
to be
whispered.
loved, Nico.
Rent
You
went up
always
and
did.
I can't cover
You
it.
just needed someone
I've been
who
trying
saw
to
your
find a new
heart
place,
before
but
your money.
nothing's working.
He swallowed the
didn't wanna
lump in his
say
throat.
anything because
She saved my
because
life,
it feels
Patricia.
like failing.
She saved more
Dennis
than
stepped
that,
closer.
she whispered.
You haven't
She saved
failed.
the boy I
You've done
used to tuck into
everything right.
bed. She
You just
brought
need
him
someone
back.
in your corner.
He had
Tears
no
welled
words,
in her
only
eyes.
gratitude.
I've never
By the
had
time
that.
they reached the
Not
beachfront
really.
garden, a private
reached
cove
out,
Nicholas had
brushing
bought
the
and
tears from her
redesigned
cheek.
just for her,
Then let
guests
me be
were
the
already
first.
seated.
She shook
White
her head.
chiffon fluttered in the breeze.
A week later,
the
Monique
aisle
and
lined
Kayla
with
stood
soft
in front of a
roses and
brownstone in
delicate
Brooklyn,
lights shaped
unsure
like
what to say.
fireflies.
It was
Miami's
quiet,
turquoise
lined
waves
with
provided the
trees heavy with
soundtrack.
frost.
But none
Warm
of it
light
mattered,
glowed through
because
the
when
windows.
Sharon stepped out
Dennis
from
turned
behind
the
the
key in
bridal
the lock.
arch, everything
It's not
else
much,
blurred.
he said.
She
But
wore
it's
a
safe.
simple ivory
Close to
gown,
Kayla's school,
elegant and
2
soft.
bedrooms,
Her
a little
curls
backyard.
pulled back,
I
but
talked
free
to the
enough
owner.
to dance in
She's
the
a friend.
breeze. Her
No rent
skin
for the
glowed
first few
under the
months.
morning sun,
After that,
caramel
we'll figure it out
warmth
together.
glowing like she carried
Monique
her own
blinked
light.
hard.
When
Tears
Nicholas
threatening
saw
to
her,
spill.
his breath
Dennis,
vanished.
I can't.
She wasn't just
can,
beautiful.
he
She was the
interrupted
reason
softly,
he was alive
because
to
I'm
see
not
beauty
doing
at
this for
all.
you. I'm doing
Sharon
it with
held her
you.
bouquet gently, trying
She looked around
and
the empty
failing
space,
to hide
the
her trembling
sunlight
fingers.
pooling on the wood
She
floor,
knew
the faint
everyone's
scent
eyes
of
were on
paint,
her,
the
but her
hum of
eyes were
possibility.
only on Nicholas.
Kayla ran
the
ahead,
man who had
peeking into
once
rooms.
sat on his kitchen
This one has a
floor
window.
wanting to die.
Can I have this one,
The man
Mommy?
she refused to
Monique
let go.
laughed, wiping her
the
cheeks.
man who spent
It's
months
yours, baby.
proving that his heart
Dennis watched them
wasn't
from
a
the doorway.
performance, but a
Mother
promise.
and daughter standing
he
in
looked
the
at her
middle
like
of an
she
empty
was
home,
the miracle
and
that
somehow
rewrote
it felt
his destiny.
fuller than any
When
mansion
Patricia
he'd
linked
ever
her
lived
arm
in.
with
with Sharon's and
He didn't
began
say
to
it
walk
out
her down the
loud,
aisle.
but he knew
Nicholas
he'd
wiped
just
a
found
tear
his
he
home
didn't
too.
bother hiding.
Over the
Sharon
following
saw it,
weeks,
and she
the
smiled.
brownstone became
The
something
soft,
more than
emotional
walls
smile
and
she
windows.
gave only to
It
him.
became laughter,
When she
morning
reached him,
pancakes,
he whispered
late-night
so
movie
quietly she
marathons.
barely heard it.
Dennis visited
Thank
often,
you for choosing
first
to
under
live
the
with
pretense
me.
of helping with repairs,
Her eyes warmed.
then with groceries,
Thank you
then
for choosing
simply
to
because
live.
he couldn't stay away.
The officiant
One
began the
night,
ceremony,
after Kayla
but they
had gone to
hardly
bed,
heard the word.
they sat by the
Their
window
hearts
with
were
mugs
speaking
of tea,
too loudly.
snow falling silently
You may
outside.
say your vows now.
Monique leaned
Nicholas
against the
inhaled
frame,
deeply,
her voice
hands
quiet.
shaking around hers.
You could
could be anywhere
Sharon
right
Mark,
now.
before
A man
you
like
walked
you
into my
doesn't
penthouse
usually
that
end
night,
up in a place
I
like
thought
this.
everything good
He
in me had
smiled.
died.
A man
I
like
thought my
me?
worth was tied to
You're
what I built.
successful,
I thought
powerful.
losing everything
People look
meant
up to
losing
you.
myself.
I'd
And then
trade
you
every
saved
bit
me.
of that, he
Not
said,
just my
for a
company,
night like this.
not just my sanity.
She looked up,
You
eyes
saved the
meeting
part
his.
of me that I'd
Why
buried
me,
under
Dennis?
ambition and armor.
He exhaled
She
slowly.
blinked back tears,
Because
lip
you
trembling.
see the world the way I
You
wish I did.
believed in me when
Because
I
when
was
you talk to
unlovable.
people, they
You
feel
held
like
me
they
when
matter.
I was unbearable.
Because you don't love
You held
from
my hand when
convenience,
I
you
didn't
love
want to
from
breathe
truth.
anymore. You
She
stood
turned
by
away,
me when the
trying
world
to steady
mocked me.
herself,
You
but the
fought for
tears
me
came
when
anyway.
I couldn't fight for myself.
I don't know how to
Sharon,
believe in things
everything
that last.
I am
I've
today,
lost too
I
much.
am because
He
you
moved
stayed.
closer, his hand
Her
finding
tears
hers.
broke free.
Then
He
let me
continued,
stay long
voice
enough to
thick with
prove you
emotion.
wrong.
You showed
The
me
quiet
that
between them
vulnerability
deepened,
isn't
heavy
weakness.
with meaning.
Love
When he
isn't
kissed her
dependence,
again, it
and
wasn't
trust
new, it
isn't
was
a gamble.
inevitable.
I vow
By
to
spring,
love you
the
with the
house had
same
changed with
devotion
them.
you gave
Plants
me
bloomed on
without
the
hesitation.
windowsills.
I vow to
Photos
stand
filled the
by you,
walls.
protect
Kayla
you,
in her new room,
cherish you,
Dennis
and
helping
lift
her with
you the way
homework,
you lifted
Monique
me.
smiling like
You
sunlight.
are my miracle.
Their love wasn't flashy.
You are my
It
beginning.
was steady,
And I will
patient,
spend the
the
rest
kind
of
that
my
made
life
ordinary
proving
days
that the man
extraordinary.
you saved was
And then
worth
one
saving.
evening, Dennis took her back to the
Sharon pressed
restaurant
his
where they'd
hands to
had
her
their
lips,
first company
eyes
dinner.
swimming.
The one where she'd been
My turn,
nervous,
she
careful,
whispered.
unaware
The
of the
wind
way
stilled,
he'd already
the ocean
started falling.
softened.
The
It
lights
felt
were
like
low.
even
A
nature
small band
leaned in
played
to
jazz in the
listen.
corner. When
Nicholas,
dessert arrived,
when I
there was a
walked into
ring
your
resting
penthouse
on the
that
plate.
night, I
Simple,
didn't save you.
elegant,
I
exactly
simply
her.
refused to let a good
Dennis
man
got
die
to his feet.
believing he
Monique
wasn't worthy
Edwards,
of life.
he said,
You were
voice
broken,
trembling with
yes,
emotion.
but even
You
in your
once told me
darkest
love
moment,
wasn't something
your
you
heart
trusted
was
anymore,
still fighting.
that life had made you
I just
careful.
held the pieces
But I've
long
watched
enough
you
for you
love
to
your
see
daughter
that.
with everything
She
you
took a
have,
shaky breath.
and I've watched you
You
teach
fell,
me what it
but
means to
you
be seen.
allowed me to help you
brought light
rise.
into my world
And in
when
that
I
journey,
didn't even know
you
I was
showed
living
me
in the dark.
gentleness I
So
never
if you let me,
expected.
I want to spend
Patience
the rest
that
of my
melted
life
my
protecting
walls,
that light.
devotion
Marry
that
me.
scared me,
Monique's
healed
breath
me,
caught.
and made me
The room
believe in
blurred.
love again.
She covered her
I
mouth,
turned you
tears
down
streaming
because I was
freely now.
afraid. Afraid of
Yes, she
heartbreak,
whispered.
afraid
Yes,
of being
Dennis.
too much or
When he
not
slid
enough.
the ring onto her
but
finger,
you kept
applause
choosing me,
rose around
openly,
them, but
loudly,
all she heard was his
fearlessly.
heartbeat against
She
hers.
smiled through her tears.
Their wedding was small.
You taught
just
me
family,
that love
a few
isn't
friends,
supposed to
and
be
the little
quiet.
girl who had
It's
started
supposed
it all.
to be honest,
Standing proudly as
persistent,
flower
and
girl,
warm.
Kayla had
So
insisted
I
on
vow
reading
to
something at
choose
the
you
ceremony.
every day,
She climbed
every
up
storm,
onto a stool,
every
holding
victory.
a paper
I
decorated
vow
in
to
pink
fight
hearts.
beside you,
Once
stand
upon a
behind
time,
you,
she began,
love you
my
fiercely,
mommy was sad,
challenge
but
you
then
when you
she
lose
met
yourself,
Mr. Turner,
and
he
remind
made
you
her laugh
always
again.
that you
I think
are
that's what
enough.
love is,
You've
when someone
always
helps
been
you
enough.
find your smile.
A few sniffles
so now
echoed
I'm
among
glad
the
she
guests.
said yes,
Even
because I
Nicholas
always
looked
wanted a
like
dad
he was
who
1
loves her
second
like
from
she
falling
deserves.
apart in her arms.
The crowd melted.
The officiant
Monique
smiled
covered
tenderly.
her face,
Rings?
overwhelmed, while Dennis
Patricia
bent
handed
down
them
and
over
lifted
herself,
Kayla into his
hands
arms,
trembling
kissing
with
her
joy.
forehead.
Nicholas
I love you
placed
too,
the ring
sweetheart,
on her
he
finger,
whispered.
whispering,
Later,
"My
when they
forever."
danced, the
Sharon
light
slid
soft
his
and
ring on
golden,
with hands
Monique
that shook.
rested her head
My
against
home.
his chest.
The sun
Do you
broke
ever
through the
think,
clouds,
she
warm
murmured,
and bright.
that maybe
I
everything
now
that broke
pronounce
us
you
was
husband
leading
and
us
wife.
here?
Nicholas
He smiled
didn't wait.
against her
He
hair.
cupped her face and
Every
kissed
scar
her, a
brought me
deep,
closer to you.
emotional kiss. The kind
Outside,
that came from
twilight
months of
faded
love,
into evening.
fear,
The
gratitude,
inside warmth
and devotion.
gathered. Laughter,
Sharon melted
music,
into him,
family.
fingers
And
gripping the
as the
back of
night
his neck,
stretched on,
tears
Monique
mixing with
thought
the
of
kiss.
all the ways her
When
life
they
had
broke
changed.
apart, the world
eviction
roared with
notice,
applause.
the sleepless
But
nights,
Nico only
the
whispered
little
against
letter
her
written in
forehead,
purple
"I'll love
crayon.
you every
It had
lifetime."
all led here,
And she whispered,
to this
"I'll
home,
cherish
this
you too."
love, this peace.
Their reception was intimate.
Dennis whispered in
soft
her
music,
ear,
dim lights,
"You brought light
heartfelt
into my life,
laughter,
Monique.
and a joy
Don't
that
ever
felt
forget
like
that."
breathing after
She
years
smiled,
underwater.
eyes glistening.
Sharon danced barefoot
"And
on
you
the
showed
sand with
me
him,
it was
her head
safe
on
to
his
shine."
chest. "Can you believe
Later
this?"
that night,
she
after
whispered.
everyone had gone,
He wrapped
the
his
house was
arms
still
around
again.
her. "I
Monique
can,
stood in the
because I've
doorway of
dreamed of
Kayla's
this
room,
since you
watching her
took that
daughter
knife
sleep.
from my hand."
Snow
She
drifted
looked up at
softly
him,
against the window,
emotional.
catching watching the
Don't
glow
bring
from
that
the
day up
streetlight
today.
outside.
I have to,
She turned
he
toward
whispered,
Dennis, who
because
stood
that was the
behind her,
day God
his arm
returned my
slipping around
heart
her
to me.
waist.
Her eyes
Looks like
softened.
she's happy,
Then
he
today is
murmured.
the day he
She
gave
is,
you mine.
Monique whispered.
He kissed
We
her
all
again,
are.
soft,
And for
long,
the first
certain.
time in her life,
A year
she
later,
believed
their
it.
house was filled with
A year
tiny
after their
cries
wedding,
and soft
New
laughter.
York woke to
Their
spring
twin
again.
babies, a boy
Morning
and a
light
girl,
streamed through
slept
the
in their
brownstone
nursery,
windows,
decorated in
scattering
soft
gold across
creams
the
and
living
sky
room,
blues.
where Kayla's
Sharon
school
swayed
drawings
gently
still
with their
covered the
daughter in
fridge,
her arms,
and
while
laughter lingered
Nicholas
in the
rocked
air
their
like
son in
music.
his. Can you
Monique's world
believe
had
we made
changed,
them? She
not with
whispered.
the flash of
Nicholas
miracles,
kissed their
but with
daughter's
quiet,
tiny head.
everyday love.
I can believe
And
anything,
now in
as
her
long
arms
as it's
was
with
the
you.
newest piece of that
Sharon
love,
smiled,
their
leaning
baby
her head
boy,
against his
Gabriel
shoulder.
Turner.
This
He
wasn't
was
the man
small,
she met in a
soft,
dark
and
penthouse.
impossibly
This was the
perfect.
man she married,
His tiny fingers
healed,
curled around
loving,
one of hers,
vulnerable,
his
whole.
breathing steady
You
against
still
her chest.
owe me something, she
Dennis
murmured.
sat beside
He
her on
raised
the
a brow.
couch, his
What?
arm around her
That
shoulders,
loud confession
unable
you
to
made
stop
at the square.
smiling.
Our
He
kids
looked at
need
his
to
son
see it
as
one
though
day.
the world had
He
just
laughed
begun
softly.
again.
I'll shout your
still
name
can't
across
believe
Miami
it, he
every year
whispered,
if you
his
want.
voice full
She
of
grinned.
wonder.
Good,
A year
because
ago,
you're
it was
mine,
just
Nicholas
us three.
Wilson.
Now
He pressed
look at
his
us.
forehead to hers.
Monique
Always.
leaned against
And in the
him,
golden quiet of their
exhaustion and
nursery,
joy
with their
mingling in her
twins
smile.
breathing softly
He's
against
got
their
your
chests,
nose, she
they
murmured,
knew one thing for
and
certain.
your stubbornness.
Their love hadn't just
Dennis
saved a
laughed
life.
quietly,
It built
kissing
a
her
new
forehead.
one, a forever
And
one.
your heart. God
Thank
help
you
us
for
all.
listening to MangaLove Storytelling.
Kayla tiptoed
If you
into
find
the
the
room,
story
her
meaningful
curls
and
bouncing,
enjoyable,
still
please
in her
remember to give
pajamas.
MangaLove a
She
like
peeked
and
at the
subscribe
bundle in
so
Monique's
you won't miss
arms,
the newest
eyes
stories.
wide.
Wishing you
Can I
a
hold
wonderful
him
day,
now?
she asked softly. Monique nodded, easing the baby into her lap. Kayla stared down at her brother, awestruck. Hi, Gabriel, she whispered. It's me, your big sister. You don't have to be scared. We've been waiting for you. Dennis's chest tightened as he watched them. Monique, radiant in the morning light, Kayla whispering to her brother, the baby blinking up at them like he already knew he was home. Monique looked up at him, eyes full of warmth. We did it, Dennis. He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. No, he said softly. You did it. You brought light into everything, into me. She smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. No, we did it together. The baby stirred, letting out a tiny sigh, and the three of them laughed quietly, the sound soft, full, and whole. Outside, the city hummed, unaware that in one small brownstone, love had rewritten its own story. And as Dennis leaned in, resting his forehead against hers, he whispered, He's the proof of everything we fought for. Monique looked down at their son, then back at him. He's the light we made together. The baby's hand twitched, finding hers. The morning light deepened to gold, and for the first time in forever, everything felt exactly right. Thank you for listening to MangaLove Storytelling. If you find the story meaningful and enjoyable, please remember to give MangaLove a like and subscribe so you won't miss the newest stories. Wishing you a wonderful day.